In this video, we're going to talk about sources of market power. And I'm just going to give you a few examples, but it is important for you to recognize that firms can have market power for lots of different reasons. So the first thing that probably comes to your mind is exclusive control over inputs. This is when one firm or a group of firms owns a majority of the product, and so there's not competition because there's a limited number of firms that actually can sell this product. So we have a lot of natural resource or extractive industries that fall into this category, diamonds or oil. Like, I can't just go open a company that mines diamonds because I don't own any diamond mines, right? And that's an important key to understanding these sources of market power. All of them have to do with some barrier to entry, right? Remember, in perfect competition, one of our assumptions was that we had free entry and exit. Well, here we have to have some barrier to entry, something that is preventing more firms from entering this market. Otherwise, as soon as we see those monopoly profits, other firms are going to want to come into the market to grab some of those. Something is preventing competition, and that is some barrier to entry. All right, so we have exclusive control over inputs. We've got intellectual property protection. So this is legal protection that's given by the government over intellectual property like books or films or pharmaceutical products. So in some sense, in this case, the government is giving the firm or creating a monopoly for the firm by issuing them this intellectual property protection, this patent or a copyright. It says, you are the only person who can distribute this film that you have produced, and if other people are doing that, then that's illegal and that they can be fined or prosecuted for that. Now, why would the government want to create a monopoly? We're going to talk about that a little bit more when we get to number 5, when we talk about natural monopolies. All right, so the next one here is government licenses, which is a little bit different than intellectual property protection, because intellectual property protection is, say, a patent that says you are the only person who's able to produce this product unless you allow others to do so. A government license is a license to operate in a particular market, and the government will issue more than one. So, for example, you have to be licensed to practice medicine in order to be a doctor. I can't just go perform surgery on someone because I am not licensed to be a doctor, and that's probably a good thing, right? We don't want random people practicing medicine without the proper training. Estheticians, like barbers and other people who do hair or makeup are also licensed by the government, usually the state or local government. That's got an R in it. There we go. To do hair. An old example was taxi cabs. This was our classic example before Lyft and Uber came and broke the monopoly down, but you had to have a license in order to drive a cab. So why would the government in this case decide to give firms market power to restrict entry into the market? Here the argument is consumer safety, right? So that's clear in the case of doctors, that when I go to the doctor, I don't want to have to worry about checking all their credentials. I want to be able to trust that they have been certified to practice medicine and that they will be competent in that practice. It's a little bit less clear, right, how that argument plays out for, say, taxis or for people who cut hair. And so restricting entry into those markets, I think, has a much weaker argument on the part of the government here. And so what we've seen, right, over the last decade is the breakdown of at least one of those monopolies, and would guess that at some point, you know, the market for cutting hair will also become more competitive. All right, so the next one is interesting. It's network externalities, and this has a lot to do with a lot of the new internet companies. But basically, a network externality is when the product becomes more valuable to consumers when more people consume it. So for example, all of your social media sites, right? You don't want to be on necessarily like a social media site with only 10 other people. That might be boring. You'd rather be on Twitter or Instagram or whatever it is that you guys use these days, to see like what is everyone saying, right? So we've got social media. We've also got like gaming systems here, computer operating systems. You'll notice, right, there's not a ton of operating systems out there, right? There's Mac, the Apple, and then there's Windows, and then there's, you know, Linux, and that's about it. And there's not this huge number of competition in operating systems, right? Because this has a network externality. Okay. All right, so the last one we're going to talk about a little bit more in depth, and that's natural monopoly. We have actually already talked a little bit about natural monopoly. We can also call that a club good, right? When we talked about excludability and rivalry in the last section. So here we have a good that is fairly non-rival. Okay, the cost of one individual's consumption is very low, and it's excludable. We can charge for it. And we've got some examples would be utilities. Okay, so theme parks, media, railroads. Okay, and what you'll notice here is that these are all industries that have a really, really high fixed cost and a very low marginal cost. Okay, so high fixed cost, this is defined by high fixed cost, low marginal cost industry. Okay, so the cost of producing this product is such that we have this one big investment at the beginning, and then it doesn't really cost very much to produce one more unit of the product, right? So like when I think about electricity provision or like water provision, right? Like, yeah, having the infrastructure of water treatment plants and pipes running to everyone's houses and right, all of that stuff, that the cost of that is really high. The cost of me getting one more glass of water out of the tap is really low, right? It costs a lot of money to build Disneyland, right? Cost of letting one more person come in is really low. So we have this high fixed cost, high upfront investment, low marginal cost type of industry. And this relates back to this category here, where we have patent and copyright protections, because basically in these high fixed cost, low marginal cost industries, competition can't really exist. The good cannot be provided by a competitive market. Okay, why is that? Well, let's look at our graph here. So you'll notice that I've got a cost curve graph here, like the ones we were looking at in topic 11, but it doesn't look the way that we were drawing them there, right? It looks weird. We've got here a low, kind of maybe barely increasing marginal cost. And then we've got this really high, right? This average total cost that starts out really high and then just decreases. Why is that? Because average total cost is the cost per unit. So like imagine you build Disneyland and only one person comes in. The cost per person is going to be really, really high, right? As more and more people come in, right? Because the cost of each additional person is really low. As more and more people come in, that average total cost is just decreasing like this. We're dividing the fixed cost across all of the customers. So as we have more and more customers, that average total cost is decreasing. And these two lines actually don't cross here. So this is a much different graph than we've seen before, but this represents this high fixed cost, low marginal cost structure. And then the other two lines that we have on the graph here are a demand curve and a marginal revenue curve. So you haven't seen these, the demand curve and the marginal revenue curve on these cost curve graphs before, but we have them here, and there's really nothing new going on other than the fact that we've got everything on the same graph. So what would the competitive market equilibrium be? Well, the competitive market equilibrium would be here, right? Competitive market equilibrium would be where supply equals demand or price equals marginal cost. Okay, here's perfect competition. And what is the problem with this point? Well, now that I have my average total cost curve on this graph, I can easily see that at this point, at this price here, profits are going to be negative. Why? Because my price is below my average total cost curve. Okay, so the problem is that the competitive market equilibrium, which occurs where price is equal to marginal cost, cannot occur because at that point, price is less than average total cost. In other words, profits are negative. Okay, so the competitive market equilibrium cannot exist, right? And you can see that in the production of, say, media, for example, right? If we have, you know, a competitive market for movies, right? Say we've spent all this money to produce this movie, and then anyone could just go and share or sell that movie. We'd get a competitive market in distribution, right? Which happens in other countries where piracy is really common. Then you've got basically, right, no incentive for the firm to develop the movie, right? The firm is not going to spend all this money to produce a movie and then make no money selling it. So that's why we have patent copyright protections, because we want these industries to exist, right? We want to develop new pharmaceutical products. And so we need to allow the firms to charge a price higher than marginal cost to recoup their upfront investment, their fixed cost, so that they will develop and provide these products. That's one solution, right? To just, one solution, right? To allow monopolies to exist, but regulate them. Why do we need to regulate them? Well, if we just allow a monopoly to exist in this market, where will we end up? Marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Increase the price. And this is our monopoly point here. Profits are positive. See, our price is higher than our average total cost curve. That's good. We got positive profits so the industry can exist, but it's not good, right? Because the firm has restricted the quantity they sell in order to increase their price. They're They're taking all of the surplus from consumers and we get a bunch of deadweight loss, right? So this is actually not a good outcome either. What is the best outcome in this situation? Well, if we want to allow monopolies to exist, we should regulate them so that we get to this point, which is a second best outcome. The socially optimal outcome is still perfect competition, okay? But we can't get there in a competitive, in any kind of market, right? We can't get there in a private market, right? So we could allow monopolies to exist and then regulate them to get to this point, because this is the lowest price at which profits are not negative, right? This is where profits are equal to 0. At this price, we would get profit price equal to average total cost, or profit equal to 0. Okay, so we could try to regulate, allow monopolies to exist, or allow firms to have market power and regulate them. That's what we're attempting to do with our patent and copyright laws. Or if we really want to try to get to this socially optimal point here, we can do that, just not through a private market, right? The government can provide this product. Right, so, and that's the way it works with, like, say, utilities, right? The electric company is many times owned by the state, or at least managed by the state. Like water is provided by the state usually, or the city, the local municipality. Trash collection, all these kind of utility goods are usually provided by the government. All right, so those are really your two options when trying to regulate and manage natural monopoly markets. Natural monopoly markets occur because of the cost structure of providing the product. And so it's important to be able to recognize those markets, to understand that they are naturally going to have market power, and that the government can then try to figure out in that situation what is the best way to manage that market. All right, in the next video we're going to be tackling price discrimination, which is one of my favorite topics, so I'm excited.